Hello, friends. Vitaly Portnikov here. The U.S. reports the seizure of the Bella 1 tanker linked to Venezuelan and Iranian oil shipments. The company officially owning the tanker was suspected by the prior Biden administration of ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, shipping oil and cargo for this key Iranian regime entity, deemed terrorist by the U.S. Later, it was said the tanker also carried Venezuelan oil. However, it was empty, without cargo, when seized. The U.S. court issued the warrant to seize the sanctioned tanker. But after that, the tanker, previously registered under the flag of Guyana, re-registered as a Russian vessel, even changing its flag to the Russian Federation. Thus, we can say that U.S. Homeland Security, in cooperation with the U.S. Department of Defense, seized a tanker under the Russian flag for the first time in many years. The Foreign Ministry of Russia also commented on the tanker's ownership, stating, "Moscow doesn't understand the heightened attention to this tanker in international waters, according to international law." But these explanations didn't satisfy the United States. They now stress the seizure aligns with President Donald Trump's policy, prohibiting sanctioned ships in the Western Hemisphere. So, the tanker seizure echoes the U.S. op in Venezuela, targeting Maduro, already indicted in the U.S. But it also shifts the dynamic between Russia and the U.S. First, Trump shows Putin his ally can't evade U.S. capture, despite support from Moscow and Beijing. Then, U.S. forces from other agencies seize a tanker Moscow calls Russian. Realistically, it is Russian. Flying the Guyanese flag was typical of Russia's shadow fleet, evading Western sanctions for energy trade. This tactic is used with sanctioned nations like Iran and Venezuela. It's an energy alliance against the U.S. The tanker, under a Russian flag, carries cargo for Tehran and Caracas. Now, many wonder how Moscow will react. Putin doesn't want to anger Trump. Talks with the U.S. fit his strategy to prolong the war in Ukraine. Putin stalls in U.S. talks to prevent new harsh U.S. sanctions against Russia. But if the Russian government doesn't react at all to the seizure of a tanker re-registered specifically under Russian law, it will, of course, show Putin's weakness and the limits of his power compared to the intentions and capabilities of the American president. You could say it failed again, since the so-called peace plan was floated by the Russian president's foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov, and Putin's special envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, not only to start a new round of negotiations, but also to prevent sanctions against Russia's largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. But Trump, despite his willingness to negotiate with the Kremlin, didn't refuse to implement these sanctions. And this is in a situation where Rosneft and Lukoil already have serious losses, even before the introduction of new U.S. sanctions. And in fact, now, like another energy giant of the Russian Federation, Gazprom, it is subsidized from the Russian budget. Now a new situation which speaks of miscalculation and a misunderstanding by the Kremlin of the unpredictability of the American president. Obviously, when Moscow decided to repaint the flag of the sanctioned tanker, it meant a clear signal to the United States: don't touch the Russian ship. It will only worsen relations between Washington and Moscow. And probably after this repainting and re-registration in Moscow, they hoped that the American Special Services would leave the tanker alone, and that in the future it would be able to carry out new specific tasks for the Russian Special Services to cooperate with both the Venezuelan and Iranian regimes. But that didn't happen. No one in Washington took Moscow's tank repainting seriously, and its seizure happened right before the world's eyes. This put the Kremlin in a tough spot. They could ignore it, showing Russian policy comes first, not wanting to fight with Trump, even when he ignores them and their moves, or they could react quite strongly. Well, that would mean, first, a change in diplomatic tone, we'll see what the Russian Foreign Ministry says, and second, finding ways to hit back at American economic interests. Putin's options are limited since it's not the U.S. under Russian sanctions, but Russia under American ones. And it's not the U.S. fearing new Russian economic blows, but Russia wanting to avoid new American ones. But we can imagine hybrid warfare, always used by Moscow, to show Putin must be reckoned with. Say, unknown drones over U.S. military sites in Europe, or releasing dirt that the White House won't like. Though most likely Moscow will avoid a strong reaction, at least at first, and swallow the tanker seizure by U.S. forces. And this proves again that Putin, despite all the crimes his army commits in Ukraine, can't really compete in terms of influence and power with the United States, at least when it comes to geopolitical role. Putin's allies are forced to flee their countries or appear in American court, and Russian president can't do anything to help them stay in power. And Russian tankers are being seized by Americans as if Russia is some banana republic, not the superpower that the Russian president sees his state as. Well, it's obvious that in this situation, Putin will really have to choose a political banana menu. And if you liked this video, please subscribe to my social networks, to the channels on Patreon, Bami Coffee, and Danatello, who help develop these resources. Use the sponsorship function on YouTube itself. Victory and peace to you. Good luck.